friends from not so long ago, Neil Lane and George Abbey. It's just a great honor to be in your presence tonight. And what wonderful memories I have of the times that we had together and the things we did together, the adventures on behalf of the United States of America and NASA. And Pat Wright, my dear colleague and friend, thank you so much for this invitation and just all the wonderful things you've done. You've been such an inspiration to so many youth in particular. Well, congratulations to all of you on 50 years of a close collaboration with NASA and Johnson Space Flight Center and Rice University. It's just a fabulous, fabulous city and warm personal partnership to be a part of. I want to congratulate you, David, on your leadership here. With your guidance and the work of an outstanding faculty, Rice is really growing in internationalism and its footprints abroad. David, you and Ping, it's been such a pleasure to get to know you, Ping. What a wonderful ambassador you are. You're to be commended for your vision and your dedication here and abroad. You've become ambassadors for this university all over the world, and I know that you're thinking even at dinner all sorts of visions about how you can bring more of the world to Rice. My husband Chris and I have had many wonderful times here being guests of Rice University recently at the AAU meeting where they just did a terrific job. And yes, I have my own very owl as a souvenir, and tomorrow I intend to give you one. Well, I'd like to start by telling you all a story that I was told by a scientist when I was at NASA headquarters in the mid-1990s. A car carrying a team of American geologists was bumping along a dirt road in Central America on their way to a field study. Suddenly, a group of armed and hostile rebels came out of the jungle and stopped the car and demanded identification. Well, one of the Americans was fumbling for his ID, and the first ID that he found was his NASA badge. So he pulled that out, and the rebel leader looked at it and growled the word NASA and managed to smile and kind of pointed up and waved them on. So he was much relieved that he was a representative of NASA and that even in this jungle that people understood the magic of that word. The scientist who told me this worked at a NASA field center, and it was his story. The tale demonstrates well the dramatic impact that NASA has made on the world. I know that many of you here have contributed to that influence. On a September day in 1962, President Kennedy stood in the Rice Stadium and declared, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade and to do other things, not because they're easy, but because they're hard." Those are words that we all know by heart, especially here in Houston. NASA and the Johnson Space Center put those words into action, and they've added inspiration and benefit to our lives as a result. The stirring call to new and ambitious goals in space was a response to the nascent Russian space program that had launched the world's first satellite, Sputnik, in 1957, and the first human, Yuri Gagarin, in 1961. We had been beaten on the starting leg of the space race, and reaching the moon first became a matter of national pride. Kennedy's speech, of course, was given against the backdrop of the Cold War, and the emphasis was on the competition among nations. He used words like, "The exploration of space is one of the greatest adventures of all time, and no nation which expects to be a leader of other nations can expect to stay behind in this race for space." And he said, "Our leadership in science and in industry, our hopes for peace and security, all require us to become the world's leading spacefaring nation." And we met his challenge. In 1969, NASA put Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Mike Collins on a course to the moon with the intention of landing the Eagle and returning all safely to Earth. Watching Neil Armstrong step onto the lunar surface changed the trajectory of my life. It inspired me to switch careers, earn my doctorate in physics, and eventually work at NASA. Now, as president of Purdue, I lead an institution that calls itself the Cradle of Astronauts. As President LeBron mentioned, 23 Purdue graduates have been chosen to fly in space. Among our Apollo astronauts are Armstrong himself, as you heard, and Gene Cernan, who we'll see tomorrow at the game, the most recent man on the moon, of course, as well as Gus Grissom and Roger Chaffee, both of whom perished in a 1967 pre-launch test of Apollo 1. The space shuttle, launched in 1981, marked our nation's first space transportation system. This program spanned 3 decades and included 135 missions, among them the deploying and resurfacing, of course, of the famous Hubble telescope. It carried in stages the largest space station ever constructed, ensured it was international in scope with parts contributed by 7 countries, ferried astronauts and cargo to and from it. Space shuttle missions also added diversity among the ranks of the astronauts. The shuttle program, too, attracted our students at Purdue. For many of them, Neil Armstrong and Gene Cernan were their heroes, and so we spawned a next generation of astronauts. In fact, Purdue alumni have flown on 47 space shuttle flights as commanders, pilots, and spacewalkers, as medical officers and scientists. All have called Houston and the Johnson Space Center home. Although our astronauts are a source of national pride, they'd be the first to acknowledge that the space program was built on the ingenuity and the commitment of its countless talented engineers and scientists. Neil Armstrong himself is consistent in crediting the engineers who put him on the moon. The science mission is one of the true glories of the space program. At universities and laboratories across the nation, we can point to significant discoveries about the cosmos and about earth, fire, and water, and new materials accomplished in space because of the ingenuity of our scientists and their students. Many of our university faculty members are focused on tomorrow's breakthroughs in space. For example, at Purdue, one faculty member is developing a rocket engine designed for a vehicle to land on the moon. We have our own mini-jet propulsion center on the campus. Another leads research focused on the effects of zero gravity on fluids, which may improve life support systems. And yet another is working on new types of rocket propellants that could have implications for human space missions. I know that space science thrives at Rice University, and there are many wonderful technologies being developed through the National Space Biomedical Research Institute, where current and former panel members have flown 71 space missions. For example, your study of the hazards of exposure to lunar dust may one day result in new ways to deliver medicine directly to the lungs in spray form. And also the integrated LTM iRevive system, which will be a tool for providing medical care to astronauts through long-duration space flights, may ultimately be used in emergency rooms, on the battlefield, or at an accident scene. With the end of the shuttle program, NASA's opened a new chapter on space exploration. Purdue, like Rice, is determined to be a part of what comes next. So, what does come next? That's the question of the day. It was certainly your question of today. The workforce to support the space program is changing dramatically. The dream that was once so focused here in the Rice Stadium has become diffuse. There are important earthbound challenges today that are heralded as the next Sputnik challenge. Recent editorials launch past achievements of the space program, express nostalgia for an exciting era, and anxiety about its future. Several generations of young scientists and engineers were profoundly inspired to reach for the moon, and they had dreams of going even further. And I think we will. But we have to recognize first that everything has changed. As one columnist recently pointed out, the next 50 years in space will certainly be different than the last 50 years. We have important steps to take on our way to our next giant leap in space, and they differ in character from the steps we took for our first giant leap. So let's look to history to devise our first step. The history of Western expansion in our own country is replete with bold, heroic actions of individuals. But we have a great nation because we provided, often in fits and starts, and at great cost and peril, funding for that expansion. The federal government had a prominent role in funding the expansion, as did private enterprise. The space program is going to continue to cost money, and a lot of it. To be truly effective, to build on our progress, the program is going to need consistent and sustained financial support. In a recent Science Progress report on U.S. scientific research and development, authors Matthews, Lane, and Evans, I think one of them is just smiling here, from your own Baker Institute indicated, quote, over the last 4 decades, federal funding for the physical, mathematical, and engineering sciences had declined by 0.5% of GDP, while other countries such as China and Japan have emphasized these fields. Regrettably, it appears this trend will continue and NASA will be hit hard. The House Appropriations Committee report for fiscal year 2012 stated, quote, NASA needs to develop and pursue new and different ways of operating that will promote efficiency and economy. Annual budget increases can no longer be counted on as the means for achieving mission goals. This is familiar rhetoric to me as a public university president. If the recommendations for the federal budget are approved, total NASA funding would decline nearly 9%, and funding for space operations would decline more than 25%. It's not all bad news. NASA's aeronautics research would see an increase of nearly 7%, and a new category for space technology would be created and is definitely needed. We need to be pragmatic about these trends. The shift in our nation's spending away from science and technology and other nations' corresponding increase in these areas indicates a global shift in priorities. Global partnerships, then, will be crucial to leveraging the resources and technical capabilities of other nations and making better use of diminished dollars at home. We've developed a new international laboratory in space with unique opportunities for utilization, and I think we've seen only the beginnings of that utilization. We know how to screen and train astronauts for the rigors of space habitation, and we've learned much about the science of the body and its adaptation to microgravity. We've learned to design sophisticated life support systems. This knowledge and skill set are valuable for the U.S. commercial industry. NASA can and should be a vital partner in low-cost commercial access to low Earth orbit. So that's the first step, sustained funding as much as we can do and making it go a lot further. We need to utilize our large investments in laboratories in space and on the ground because they're unique national assets. We can maximize funding by being good partners, both locally with industry and abroad with other countries. So let's move to step 2. When one actually looks at what's been accomplished in space by both robotic and human space flights, it's truly awe-inspiring. Yet with some exceptions, like the Hubble, the public is largely unaware of the new knowledge generated by the last 30 years of human spaceflight. In a commentary last April, Jeff Faust, the editor and publisher of the Space Review, attributes NASA's difficulties to 3 things: the loss of Cold War momentum that fueled the shuttle and space station programs, the national fiscal crisis, and the perceived lack of importance of space policy. He said, quote, "It's telling that the space-related issue that has attracted the broadest degree of interest among members of Congress is where NASA will transfer the shuttle orbiters upon their retirement." Everyone in this room understands the positive effects of discoveries that are translated into commercial products and services. The translational benefits of the space program are legendary. There are pacemakers for cardiac patients, household smoke detectors, cordless power tools, just so many different kinds of inventions, and you all know well a lot of what they are. These innovations and so many others can be traced directly to the work of NASA scientists and engineers. Research in space is addressing, directly or indirectly, many of the world's grand challenges, whether it's climate change, new materials, education, disease, hunger, new energy sources, and systems engineering on a massive scale. It's also answering some of the most profound questions about the cosmos. Witness the alpha magnetic spectrometer on the space station, delivered on the penultimate shuttle flight with, I might add, astronaut Drew Foisto on board. And its investigations of dark matter and antimatter. This research has to be translated and its benefits communicated if we are to refocus national attention on the space program. So the second step is, in my opinion, communicate, communicate, communicate. Who will conduct the research? Who's going to make the next giant leap? This brings me to the third step: inspiring our young people to dream and ensuring that they have opportunities for careers in space science, engineering, and technology. Many of the space pioneers, those who came of age during the height of the space race, are retiring or seeking other employment. We wonder where the talent needed to position us further and faster and cheaper in space is going to come from. We want to attract our youth to science, technology, engineering, and math, the STEM disciplines, and realize that other nations are simply now doing this better, more aggressively. In its report, Rising Above the Gathering Storm, Revisited, the Academy's committee observed that the United States now ranks 27th among developed nations in the proportion of college students receiving degrees in science and engineering. Universities, of course, have a special responsibility in this area, but their efforts can be leveraged by the national laboratories, like Johnson Space Center, at which students can intern and hopefully find rewarding work. Early engagement before college is equally important, as Pat Rife and her colleagues know well. The annual Sally Ride Festival, sponsored by the Rice Space Institute, is a great example of this. As thousands of middle school girls hear directly from astronauts and learn about space, they also learn what is possible in their own lives. If the value of the space program can be made clear to a young person, all of our young people, I believe a new generation will be drawn to its portals and wormholes and to the greater Houston area where they can be part of a new dream. That dream should be as bold as the one that we were once a part of. It should create intense curiosity and encourage the development of entirely new methods of exploration. It's a dream you've already begun, the Mars Exploration Program. Think about this. Mars is theoretically in the habitable zone. Under the right condition, long ago, life might have flourished. A combination of robotic and human missions to the planet would provide the inspiration that could attract our young people and new technologies to the program. Today, as the Mars rover named Opportunity looks over the rim of Endeavour, one cannot help but wonder if a human being will stand where a robot now sits viewing a 14-mile-wide crater, seeking signs of water. Does it sound unimaginable? Not to anybody in this room. I was invited by JSC to attend the final shuttle launch on July 8th to see Atlantis lift off. It was magnificent, as all the shuttle launches have been. A very special, memorable moment for all of us who witnessed it. I know that the future is going to witness a lot more launches, although not all of them are going to be performed by NASA. I envision rockets carrying pilots and scientists and engineers and cargo and tourists into space. I imagine that space will open up and that soon low Earth orbit will have new highways and new stations in the sky and abundant Earth viewing opportunities. And I even imagine that I might be on one of those flights. At the same time, I imagine that NASA will have set its sights and its technological goals on higher Earth orbit, and will be encouraging young people to join the effort to develop materials and tools, propulsion systems and power for longer voyages into space. 50 years ago, when President Kennedy first challenged our nation to commit to space exploration, he warned of the difficulties that lay ahead. Our difficulties today are different than he would have imagined, yet we are no less committed to meeting them. We have the same passion, the same imagination, the same drive to explore that resulted in the first giant leap. And we have something new, hard-won experience in space. We've been there, and we're going back. Thank you.
Okay, so I lied. One more time for me. It almost sounds like you were at our workshop today, because all of the themes that you touched on and all of the passion that was there today has just been expressed in your very wonderful lecture. So I really appreciate that. And hopefully we'll have many future dialogues in the future with regard to what we're trying to do in space exploration. As been mentioned several times, Rice is playing Purdue tomorrow. And the rivalry's already started, because while you were speaking, I was handed a note. I didn't see who gave it to me, but I can guess. I won't look at him. The first man on the moon was indeed a Purdue alumnus, but he actually carried an experiment designed by a Rice professor. We have two great
Let the rivalry continue.
We have two great universities who have worked together for many years, and long may it continue. Thank you very much.